What's up, friends? Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone has been doing well. I'm excited to be making another video. I feel like it's been a while since I sat down in front of the camera, but this video is going to be me going over all of my most favorite horror books that I read in 2025 and also a few of my least favorite. I love horror, but I'm also very picky with horror, so let's get right into it. This year I read Mean-Spirited by Nick Roberts after hearing so many people say that this was one of the scariest books they ever read. I finally got around to reading it and I loved this book. This book is about a teacher who goes to one of his former students' houses, finding out that she has just passed away and sees that her dog was left behind. So he takes her dog into his own care and the very dark and crazy presence that follows this dog. I've read a lot of really good, really dark possession stories throughout my reading journey, but I have to say this is the first time I've ever read anything that was like possessed pet, and this was terrifying. In my opinion, this book had an extremely solid beginning, super solid middle, and a very solid ending. Like all around, this was just a very well-told story, and it was definitely terrifying. Next, I'm going to go over 3 books from one of my favorite indie authors, and it just goes to show that he's a fantastic writer because 3 of his books are on my favorites of this year. The author's name is John Ashley. The very first book I ever read from him was called The Dark Thing, and I read this last year. This was 5-star perfection. I loved it. And every other thing that I've read from him so far is just so good. So the first one we have is When Angels Bleed. This book was extremely dark. If you enjoyed The Black Farm by Elias Witherow, you would enjoy this one as well. This is about a man who's currently wanted for murder and he's on the run when he takes a random turn down a strange dirt path road, and it leads him to a farm where the owner of the farm has been trapped there for over 3 decades. There is no escaping from this farm, although this man is convinced that he can get away. It is extremely dark and just extremely graphic and traumatizing, but I loved this book. I thought it was so well done. The next one from him is a little novella with an incredibly disturbing cover. The Girl in the Attic follows a single mom and her daughter who live in their home, but there is also a demon living in the attic, and the mother is convinced that as long as she just throws it some food every once in a while, it won't disturb them. I don't typically love novellas because I always feel like it's simply just a beginning and an end and there's no guts to the story. But this was 70 pages of such a well-told little story that just kept me turning the pages the whole time, and this book honestly made me really look into reading more novellas because I loved it. John Ashley just hits every single time. I was shocked at the end of this book. The last one of his is A Nest of Broken Bones. This one is about a mother who will do absolutely anything for her child, but her son is not a normal boy. He has different needs, and these needs cause her to have to go out and do really crazy things in order to meet his needs. I felt like this one was I'm being very vague, but I felt like this one was such a good mix of horror and small town mystery. There's the mom side of the story where she's trying to do her best to take care of her son, and then there is a detective side of the story where they're trying to figure out this string of missing people, and it's got really good small town vibes. They live kind of secluded. It's just a really great story. I loved this one. I feel like this one was maybe good for a beginner horror reader. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but it was a really good book. Next I have When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy, and I feel like nobody should be surprised that this is on my list. This book was so good, and I feel like it was very well loved by everyone who read it this year. It follows Jess, who's a struggling actress with a very fun personality. I loved reading about her. She had a very carefree attitude, even though her life was kind of in shambles. She had the perfect dark humor to go along with it. Well, she comes across a 5-year-old boy who is hiding in the bushes outside of her apartment. She takes on the role of protecting this 5-year-old boy, and now they are both on the run together from the father, who is crazy. There's a lot going on with the father in this story. I just loved everything about this. I thought it was so well done. Like I said, the main character was just really fun, and the storyline was definitely unique. This became one of my favorites before I even finished reading it. The House That Held Her by Ellis Hart. This one was so atmospheric. It was almost like a psychological thriller book that had gory horror added into it. It follows a woman named Margot who just moved to Florida for a fresh start. They purchased a place known as Hawthorne Manor and moved into it, but the house holds a lot of secrets. The previous owner of the house was a fan of puzzles, so there's lots of like random puzzles and hidden things and clues left behind in the house, and the further Margot dives into the story trying to like figure out what the history of the manor is, the more crazy things start coming to light. There's also a lot of the people in the small town that like know secrets about the house but are not willing to talk about them. The eeriness of this was just really well done, and I was definitely sucked into this story. I felt like it put a very unique spin on your typical haunted house trope. This was a good book. Then I have 2 books by Delilah S. Dawson. I recently discovered her books this year and fell in love. The first one I read was Guillotine. I never know how to say this word, but this was just so much fun, and her books are definitely on the shorter side. This one is about a girl who's dating this guy solely because his mother is a fashion icon and she's been dying to meet her. So she's dating him and leading him to believe that things are working out, and finally he invites her to come and spend the holiday on his family's like private island, which is extremely elite. When she gets there, she has to even sign an NDA, and it's just like the life of the 1%. Very rich. However, she doesn't know that during this time that she is staying on this island is also the same time where the staff of this family have decided to play out their plan of revenge on the family. So this book goes from 0 to 100 really fast. It was just a really fun one. I like to say about this book that all hell just breaks loose and you're just along for the ride. The next one I read from her was Bloom, and I loved this book. This was about a woman who goes to the farmer's market and meets another woman who's there selling her homemade goods, and she becomes like inexplicably drawn to her to where she finds herself going back to the farmer's market every week just to see her. These two develop a pretty close bond, and as you read about them getting closer and closer together throughout the story, there are obvious red flags, but it's almost impossible to see where it's going. And when you get to where it's going at the end, like, oh my goodness, the last like, I don't know how many pages of this book, but the last few chapters of this were absolutely wild. I loved the writing style in this one because it's such a short book. It was all story, all plot. There was no like extra fluff, and yet somehow the writing was still very like descriptive and romanticized. I just thought this was so good, and I want everyone to read this one. A lot of these books that I read this year are short, like something about a shorter book just really captivated me this year. So another one is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito, and this is, yeah, another short one. This book was wild. The story follows Winifred, who becomes like a live-in nanny for this very wealthy family. She's there to take care of the children and the house and just help out where she can, but from the moment you start reading about her, you can tell that there are very obvious red flags. She tells the children bedtime stories, but then also jokes about like eating children. Honestly, the best thing that I did with this book is go in completely blind. I had no idea what I was getting into, and the more the story unfolded, the more shocked I was. However, if you do read the synopsis of it, you can kind of guess a little bit, like it hints a little bit at what happens. So if you like going into books blind, I highly recommend doing so with this one. If not, give the synopsis a read. But yeah, basically she becomes a nanny for the family and she's crazy. This one I read in January and it has stuck with me the entire year. I felt like this book deserved so much more hype. It's called Deadly Animals by Marie Tierney. It follows a 14-year-old girl named Ava who's fascinated with learning how bodies decompose. So she'll find like roadkill on the side of the road and take it back to her little spot where she can like study the effects of decomposition on the body. One day she's out looking around and comes across the body of one of her school classmates. She does the right thing and gets the authorities involved. However, she herself just can't help herself from like investigating and getting to the bottom of what happened to her classmate. And this book just does such a fantastic job of blending like the little girl and everything that she is working on with the actual like detectives on the case and their discoveries. This one was more of a slower burn also, like not typically what I look for in a book, but it was just such a well done story. Like I said, I read it in January and it never left my brain. Then I have A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. This is another novella and it was just a banger. Like I can't describe how good this book was. It was so unique. It's about a highly, highly religious man who passes away and has no doubt that he's about to go to heaven, but instead he shows up at the gates of hell. This hell that he finds himself in is an immensely vast and endless library of books, and the only way to escape it is to find and locate the one book that tells your completed life story. It's hard for the brain to like comprehend the amount of books that they describe are in this library, but if you take a closer look of the cover, you can see that this cover is actually walls and walls and walls of books, and it just continues to go all the way up and continues to go all the way down. Like, it's literally endless. This book was a lot of fun. It's a very quick read, and it put an entirely new perspective on how the word hell can have several meanings. Another book that released this year that I read and absolutely loved is The Dead Husband Cookbook by Danielle Valentine. This one follows a very famous woman named Maria. She's a famous chef, she was on TV, literally everyone knows her name. When her husband died, the body was never found, and she remained completely silent on the topic. She refused to ever speak about it. Now she's ready to write a book and tell all of her secrets, but she asks for one specific woman to be the editor for that book, and she refuses to have anyone else. It's like top secret. So we follow the story as Thea, the editor, goes to stay at Maria's house so that she can closely help her edit her book, and all of these secrets start coming out. The atmosphere in this book was just so good, so thick and heavy. I love the way it wove like through the characters and through the stories and through the secrets and the parts that everyone played throughout the plot. It's just such a good book. This one I felt like really deserved so much more hype when it first came out. The last book I have on my list of favorites is Beta or Beta by Sammy Scott. I never know which pronunciation of this to go with, Beta or Beta. Anyway, I typically don't like AI-driven, like very futuristic types of books that are in the horror genre. Like, I just have such like weird issues with AI in horror books. I don't know, it's weird, but this one was so well done. It follows a guy named Michael who's presented with a very unique opportunity to be the first person to like test drive a fully AI driven home. The house is top of the line, extremely modern, controlled completely by technology. Everything that he could possibly need is just a voice command away. And if he stays in the house for a certain amount of time and completes like this trial, they'll award him with a bunch of money. But in the second point of view of this book, it follows an author who wrote a story. He wrote a book about a man who goes and test drives a fully automated AI smart home. It's mind-bending. Like, the way these two stories blend together, like, and you're unsure exactly what you're reading about, it is, like I said, it's so well done. It also starts out very much as a mellow story until suddenly it's far from being mellow and things just get crazy. This one, the ending of this one, like really got my emotions going and made me so angry, but it all played into the plot together just incredibly well. This was a really cool book. With that being said, one of the worst horror books that I read this year was William. This one was also like an AI horror, but it was a robot, like the robot that he built, and his name was William, but then the robot kind of had like a mind of its own kind of thing. Like books like this is an example of the books that I don't love, that are like AI horror books. Although I had heard a lot of good things about this one, I really just didn't like it. I'm curious to know what you guys thought about this one if you've read it. Another one that I had really high hopes for and it totally disappointed me was Daphne. This is by Josh Mellerman, the same author as Incidents Around the House and Bird Box. Because I liked those books, I had really high hopes for this one and it just really disappointed me. This is more YA horror and I just couldn't connect with anything in this story. The next one that disappointed me, I just barely read recently in the last couple of weeks, and it's Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake. Olivia? I think Olivia. I was so excited for this book and it really disappointed me. It started out so strong and then it got very slow, and then I was like, okay, I'm committed, maybe it'll get better, let me just finish reading it. And then the ending was like so abrupt and I was like left staring at the wall, not in the good way of staring at the wall. In the very beginning, you're introduced to a woman named Sloane who just had a baby. She's kind of in that rut of postpartum mom life where none of your clothes are fitting and you just don't feel like yourself anymore. And you've taken a lot of time off work, and she's just getting ready to go back into the workforce. And she was just a really enjoyable female main character. She had a snarky vibe, which I love. She was fun and sardonic. Like, I love all of those things in a female main character. But the second point of view was like a bunch of girls in this like sorority, and I just couldn't connect with that. I didn't like how the two came together. I would have loved this a lot more if the story continued with only the first female main character and just like maybe went in a different direction. I didn't like the second point of view very much, and yeah, ultimately this one was such a disappointment for me. The last one I have that I didn't like very much is Polybius, and this book started out so cool. It was like this old retro vibe where this video game in this arcade was like possessing people, and I thought the premise was so cool, but I just ended up not liking it. Like, it fell flat in the middle and then really just continued to fall flatter and flatter toward the end. However, if you do like the sound of this, I have to recommend 13 Months Haunted by Jimmy Giuliano, because this book was super well done. It has the same like old school early 90s vibes, and it's about a computer virus that was possessing and infecting people, and I just thought this one was very well done and very cool. So if you like the sound of like that old school classic vibe, then go with this one for sure. That's all I have for this video, guys. Those are all of my favorite horror books from this year. There were so many good ones, and like I said, I'm very picky with my horror. If you read and loved any of these, also let me know, or if you do read them because I mentioned them in this video, please come back and tell me. I love talking about my favorite books with you guys. Also, if there's a horror book that you loved this year and I didn't mention it in this video, comment it down below so that I can add it to my list for next year. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here with me, thank you for watching this far. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel to see more future content from me, and I will see you guys in the next video.